All right, welcome everyone to today's program, Winning Resumes and Interview Skills. You may have noticed as you entered the presentation that you have been muted. So if you have any questions throughout the program, please use the chat and staff will ask as time allows. Today's program is Winning Resumes and Interview Skills by Sarah Morris and Emma Buck from CapitalOne. And so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Sarah and Emmy. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hand the reins over to you.
Absolutely, we're ready to go. I am going to, I'll let you keep that up then. I'll kick you off your screen share in a moment.
That's
There we go.
we're good.
Perfect. All right, everybody. We're just going to flip over to our screen share. There we go. But nice to virtually meet all of you. I'm Sarah.
I'm Emmy. Nice to meet you.
And we are coming at you from CapitalOne. We do want to allow for some stragglers that might be joining a couple minutes late. So as you join, or if you've already joined, we'd love if you could write in the chat box what has been the most challenging aspect of building your resume or interviewing. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Trying to see hopefully we got some people answering things. All right, well, I am happy to share mine. Well, maybe people are spinning their wheels and thinking about some of their experiences, but sometimes I feel like when I am making my resume, I want to put everything on there, like laundry list of all my accomplishments, all the things that I have done. And it's really difficult for me to pare down and figure out what is going to be the most relevant and the most appealing to a hiring manager. So I often find that making things concise and to the point is my most difficult thing about writing a resume.
Love it. I think for me, when it comes to interviews, I think I get very nervous and in the moment. And so I don't always think through my answers fully. So having the opportunity to kind of practice those questions ahead of time and just kind of dress rehearse a little bit. I've done, goodness gracious, a million interviews at this point in my life, but it still always helps me to just keep practicing because my resume changes, as do my experiences and what I'm bringing to the table. So it always helps.
Definitely. And if you didn't share something, but something has come to mind, feel free to drop it in the chat as well.
We did get a
there we
few.
go. We got a few.
Yeah, like this.
Yes. Trying to cater the resume to the job description. Definitely. You want to be true to yourself, but you also want to make it feel relevant because we're applying for a different variety of jobs, different companies. Confusion between the requirement of job and experience I had till date. Oh, yeah. So sometimes the job requirements will say 3 years plus experience. And you're like, well, is that 3 years of professional experience? Is that 3 years of experience in HR? Is that 3 years of experience in X, Y, and Z? And so it does feel a little unclear in figuring out if you actually meet those requirements or not. And then this last one, yeah, your challenge was bringing your resume down from 4 pages to 2 pages. Yeah, that's having it. That's very, very difficult.
Yes.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that definitely resonates with me. I throw it all on a page and then gotta pull it back, which is particularly difficult. Thank you all for sharing. We appreciate the participation. Before we dive into the content, just want to give a little bit of an introduction about us. So as I mentioned, we both work at CapitalOne, and we actually work on the same team, the Emerging Talent team and HR Business Partner team in the Financial Services Division. I have been at back at CapitalOne for almost 2 years. I'm what we call a boomerang, which is somebody who worked here and then left and then came back. So especially as it comes to applying for jobs, even within my own company, I've had to do that multiple times here because I have departed, worked externally, and then come back. And I've worked in a few different careers. So I also feel like some of the comments on how do I tailor my resume for a certain type of job, things like that, I really can empathize with because I feel like I've worn a lot of hats in my professional life.
And then as Sarah said, we're on the same team. But I've been at Capital One now for 10 years. So actually I keep track of it because Sarah and I started at Capital One the same year.
Yes. But I just left for a little.
Yes, she left for a little and I just kept going. So I was thinking about it like the year Sarah would be at.
Yes, exactly.
And
Exactly.
she stuck around with me.
Yeah.
No, and I've played a lot of different hats at Capital One. So I one of the first roles I had was a recruiter. And so I actually always feel really passionate about helping people think through how to update your resume and showing up great in an interview because again as a recruiter you kind of get that experience to see how people show up and then how hiring managers think about that when they're making that final decision on who they hire. But I've also been in compensation, learning and development, performance and talent management. So I've really had a long career in HR across a variety of different roles and really just loving all of them.
She's done it all. Yes. All right. So today we're going to start with talking about resumes, why they matter, what you should include on your resume, and how to really show up as your best self on paper. And then we will move on to talking about interviewing. So tips and tricks on that, tools for answering questions, and what we call the SAR method, which I'll give you a little preview right now. So that is situation, action, and results. You can already start thinking about that. And you're probably wondering, how do I apply that? Or maybe you've heard of it before, hopefully. So we will run you through that. I'm going to take you guys through the resume section, and then Emmy will take over on the interview section. All right, resumes. I don't love to read off the slide, but I do feel like this is just a really nice one in particular to really key in on what is the goal of a resume. So one, it's you on paper. I can't go and meet a million people when I want to interview for jobs. So I'm going to look at something that is going to be concise, that I can read and understand who I am looking at and who I might be looking to hire. It's the employer's very first impression of you. So you want to show up best. First impressions, while not always accurate, hopefully they are when it comes to resumes, and they also stick in people's minds. Hopefully a resume is going to get you selected for interviews if done the right way, and also help you stand out from your competition. But you can think about it as your personal sales brochure. Again, it's you on a page. So you do want to bring a little bit of your personality, but you also want to make it professional. So you're highlighting the most important parts of your experiences and who you are at your core. And it also demonstrates your communication skills. Every single job has some aspect of written communication, whether that's just going to be through emails, through presentations, but even if you are working on something highly technical, there will always be something where you have to put it in a written form. And so this is a really good way to actually showcase those skills first and foremost. So the big question is, what do I actually put on my resume? All of these things are going to be the most relevant, but in particular, you want to make sure you are showing your main contact information so that they can reach out to you if you apply for a job. They want to see your education, and sometimes if you have relevant certifications on there, some jobs do have minimum requirements on things like bachelor's degrees, or in the HR world, the SHRM is very common to see relevant coursework. Let's say you are an accountant. They want to see maybe what you have done with that. So all of those are going to be relevant to share, especially as you're looking at the minimum qualifications on a job posting. I would say the most important thing, though, on a resume is going to be your work history and your past roles and responsibilities, because this is the meat of what you're actually seeing. Someone can study something and be really great on paper or at test taking, but where that actually comes into the play in the workforce may look really different. So what did you do in that job? What sort of people did you work with? What sort of results did you achieve? And that can include things like an actual professional job. It can include internships. It can include things even like volunteering. But any experience that you had to work professionally is going to be relevant to share here. Sometimes you might have a separate section for skills. Sometimes that might be embedded in one of the other sections, just depending on what you need to include there. But in particular, if you speak another language, that is a great place to put that. If you are really proficient in coding, so maybe saying I use data, I'm able to pull data with SQL or with Python, or even I'm very proficient with Microsoft Office. Some of those things are super relevant, again, depending on the job you're applying for. And oftentimes, not always, but depending again on the job and how you are coming to apply for the job, a summary at the top or at the bottom can be super helpful, because you can look at a whole page and it's really small text and it's a bunch of information, but the question might be, so what? What do you want to do? What is actually relevant to you? And so you can take all of the top 4 categories that were already listed and say, Hey, my name is Sarah. I studied human and organizational development, and I interned at X, Y, and Z companies. I am looking to partner with strong business leaders and really make an impact on an organization to drive profit at the bottom line, but also ensure that we are optimizing our talent. So that's not really something you can say necessarily in a bullet as to what I did in the past, but it can show what I am trying to do in my next role and really help someone understand what you're looking for in your next job.
Yeah, Sarah, I don't know if you have a strong preference, but I always think that if you're transitioning from different career fields, that my recommendation would always be to put the summary at the
Yes.
top because it really helps the recruiter and the hiring manager kind of understand that so what sooner. Because then they'll see, oh, I may be finding information here that may not be 100% one-to-one ratio back to
Yes.
like what I'm looking for in this job, but I can see from this summary, like you have the passion, you have the interest, you have the drive, you have the
Yes.
agility to like jump in.
100%. Yeah. And I think I've switched my careers. I mean, are kind of opposites in that way, right? And you've switched your careers within Capital One,
Mhm.
and I've switched my careers in and out. And so when I came to the job that I am in now, I had some HR experience in recruiting, but I didn't have what you would consider traditional skill set for the role I have now. And so I really had to figure out how, one, I could verbalize what it is I wanted to do, and then two, how I could make that show up if no one was going to talk to me, which is most of the time when you're applying for jobs, they're not talking to you at
Yeah.
first. It's the resume screen first. So how do I make sure that they understand what it is I'm looking for and don't just pass my resume over?
The other thing to think about here is like, when we highlight like work history and skills, there's also two types of resumes where I've seen it where you could do the functional resume versus the chronological resume.
Mhm.
So the chronological resume, you like highlight all of your experiences chronologically, with like the most recent being at the top and the most historical being at the bottom. But sometimes if you're switching, again, also switching career fields, you might actually choose to highlight experiences based on the skill set you're
Yeah.
bringing. I don't know if you have anything to add on that
Yeah.
because you've seen it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that might be relevant in particular for like a more technical heavy role, or my husband's in medicine. Like they do CVs, which are organized usually a little bit more that way as
Mhm.
opposed to chronologically as well. If you work in a research heavy field, that might be also where you're saying relevant research as it comes to cardiology and publications and such, as
Mhm.
opposed to the timing element too.
Yep.
So definitely depending on your field and what your qualifications and history is, I think it could make sense to do it more on categorization. All right. So, as I mentioned, I do think the most important part of your resume is going to be describing your work history. And you want the work history to really pop off the page. You want to show what it was you did and what achievements you achieved, and just what skills were used within that. And then maybe also what you learned as a result. So, really focusing on using action verbs and making sure they end with the result. Where possible, I always encourage using numbers for results as well. Now, sometimes in a field like ours, it's just a little more difficult. I helped X number of employees submit their performance reviews, maybe, right? I helped my business achieve X, Y, and Z number by helping to reorg 50 employees in this flying formation. Like there's ways to do it, but it is a little more difficult depending on what you do. And so don't be mad at yourself if you don't have relevant numbers, but I do always encourage that. So on here, you can see some examples of action verbs on the right side: assisted, managed, reorganized, generated, tracked, really showing like I actually went in and did that as opposed to something really more passive, which is achieved X, Y, and Z, whatever, something I was done for you, reviewed. Yeah, you really want to focus on what did you really physically do. And so we got an example on the bottom left here: reorganize the filing system and information flow, which resulted in substantially improved efficiency in my department. I would say for that one, I would love to know how much it resulted in improving efficiency. And again, there might not always be that. But to me, if I'm working in something optimization related and I really want that kind of candidate, that's going to jump off the page for me because that's going to help me see, wow, they really helped us become more efficient. They're minimizing our costs to do X, Y, and Z thing. I want to talk more to that candidate about what they did.
Yeah. I also think numbers really like pop off the page,
Yeah.
especially as a recruiter. You're just kind of like, you're really just looking for those high impact results. So when you see a number, you're immediately like, oh, like, what is this?
Yes, definitely. So we're gonna do a little practice. All right. So we got some action statement reminders of starting with an action verb, not using I, just making it a declarative statement, illustrating the impact and being as specific as possible. So I'd love if in the chat, feel free to take a couple minutes to just think about something, or maybe you even have one on your resume that is already awesome, or you want to workshop a little, and this is a good opportunity to improve it.
And I will encourage that it is really okay to be workshopping something
Yes.
here. That's why we're here. That's why we enjoy doing this.
No judgment zone at all. You've
Mhm.
got us, but you also have other people in the chat too who might be able to weigh in.
Sarah, what is something from your resume that you would highlight here?
Mm.
And how would you frame
I
it?
haven't looked at
know.
my resume in
I
a
know.
couple years. I know. I'm like, maybe I need to start updating my resume. I think probably since I worked in the field of recruiting, the number of candidates that I matched with, I hired for teachers. So I worked for a school network. So it would probably be matched like 50 or so teachers with 5 different schools over the course of the 2023 hiring season, who resulted in X, Y, and Z students being able to have a math teacher on day 1 of school.
I love that.
Again, the numbers for me are so key.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if, and like, again, I think it's always really great if you, even if it doesn't feel like something you can quantify, you can
Yes.
find something to quantify there. It's just to right size how big, how many,
Yes.
you know.
Because if you just say matched a lot of candidates, a
Yeah.
lot could be 5, a lot could be 500.
hmm
Can you go over? Oh yeah, I can go back. Totally. There you
Yeah.
go. Work towards reducing the annual and cumulative deficit for the school to help it stand on sound financial footing. Annual deficit was erased in 2013. Wow. Cumulative deficit was reduced from 165K to under 40K.
Oh, I
That's
love
great.
that.
I think, first of all, the numbers, beautiful. I think you could even make that even more punchy by just saying reduce the annual and cumulative deficit for the school to help it stand. You don't even need to say work towards. Reduce is like, that is a big number, because
Yeah.
if you're doing something to help, again, make someone more efficient and help them save costs, they're going to see it reduced and see the amount that you did that for and be like, whoa, that's a lot of
Yeah.
money they saved.
The only other thing I might add would for me be like how was that done?
Yeah.
Because like that is a huge result, and I think my question would be, how did you get there?
Mm.
What were the skills that you used? Was it through leadership, reorganization?
Totally.
You know,
And that might be then worked with these people
Yep.
to reduce the amount, and that might actually make more sense that way.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That the big result there is huge.
Yes. We'll pause. Anyone else?
Reduce. Yeah, there we
There you
go.
go. I love it. Love it.
Cumulative. By reducing expenses and increasing fundraising. Okay, we got the reducing, we got the nice.
I
Okay,
love it.
Mohammed. Ryan produced audit reports and worked papers under compressed timelines, achieving 100% on-time delivery following the transformation plan. 100% on-time delivery. Nice. That shows reliability. Love that.
Love that.
And work under compressed. I would love to know a little more about the compressed timelines. Like tomorrow, I guess that's a little, that I actually think that's probably going to be perfect for the resume. That would make me want to ask about the compressed timelines in an interview.
Like, it's like, I feel like that's a great interview question
Yeah,
right there.
exactly. Tell me more about that.
That's our next session.
Yeah,
Sarah.
sorry, I'm just too eager.
I know. No, I love that.
Awesome.
I honestly don't really have that many notes on that one.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really great view.
Yeah, and succinct. Yeah, awesome.
Mhm.
Good job. Feel free, if you're still workshopping one, we're going to move on, but we can come back to them. I think especially too, we can do a little review on the chat before we finish up the resume section, because we want to encourage you guys taking the opportunity. Oh, and we had some examples that I just neglected to share, so I do apologize, but I'm gonna, yeah, that's fine. You guys were doing a good enough job already.
You need us.
Yeah, you did. Exactly. The other thing that we want to go over is what to not include on your resume. Definitely avoid first person statements, I, me, or my. It just reads a little more professionally if you have it with that, again, the succinct, reduced, compressed, achieved, as opposed to saying, I reduced and did this, because that reads a little more like an interview, a little more like a story, as opposed to something factual. And it just really feels like it gets the point across. You definitely don't want to embellish something on your qualifications or previous work experience, because God forbid you say that I speak 3 languages and then they hire you and you actually only speak 1 and they're expecting you to do some translation or something or other. That sounds really, really stressful. So definitely be honest. And frankly, while there's things we can learn on the job that maybe you could embellish earlier on, that creates a stressful situation for you, your employers, and could just get you into hot water. And especially on previous work experience, most interview processes require reference checks. So if you are fabricating something on your previous employment experience and then they call that employer to ask something, you would hope that your stories are going to match, and it's going to leave a bad taste in a hiring manager's mouth if it is completely different.
Yep.
Another thing is abbreviations or jargon that's not broadly known by others. The one exception I would say to this is if you are working in a very particular field, very jargony, like software engineering, or again, even accounting, where it makes sense to use those, like NPV for something financial related. Like I think that that is okay in certain situations. I would try as much as possible to still avoid it because sometimes recruiters are not as familiar with those fields and they're going to be the first person to look at your resume. So what I would recommend is if you have an abbreviation that you want to refer to multiple times, what you could do is say net present value, parentheses, NPV, and then refer to NPV later on, just with the abbreviation would be a way you can combat that if you feel like you're going to be repetitively doing that. But you just want to make this something that could be understood by someone who doesn't necessarily work in your field so that there's enough clarity there that they can recommend it to somebody who does. And then no need to put references on the actual resume. That's going to take up so much prime real estate on where you actually want to put your skills, your accomplishments, and your work experience. So if you do want to make sure they know that you're amenable to sharing references, I would just put a little something at the top, maybe under your contact information, references available upon request.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah, something we didn't really talk about here, but like, what do you think the role of AI is in building and editing and refining your resume?
Yeah,
like how would you recommend
absolutely.
using it?
That it's so funny because I actually had this conversation with a friend a few weeks ago. I think you should use it. Use it carefully. So AI should never be the main thinker. It should be using and refining something that you already have. So let's say you have a bullet that we were just reading and we're like, oh, I'm not sure how to make this a little more results driven or to actually show the action that I did. You can use AI to help you brainstorm things. You could say, how could I make this more action oriented? And they might suggest certain words. Or what could I include here to show the value of the results I drove? And it can ask you some questions back and forth as well. So what I would recommend when it comes to AI and resumes is to have something that you've worked on already and then use it to help refine. You can even use it to help reorganize a little bit too. Something that we didn't talk much about, but the formatting of your resume. We talked about like chronological order and some of the categories to include, but there's also an element of what font should I use? How big should my text be? How do I bring my personality? Do I want pictures? I would recommend not using pictures. It's going to take up prime real estate.
Unless you're UX designer.
Exactly. There might be situations where that makes sense. And so even figuring out how can I make my resume stand out because everything is just like white paper, black text, big name, small everything else. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. Oh, and I love this.
Yeah. Mohammed used AI to change his resume from chronological to functional. I love that.
Yeah.
Like that's a great use case on how you can use AI. The other thing I was thinking about is, and we didn't really talk about this, but like customizing your resume for the employer.
Yes.
So, and again, this is where I would use AI more as like, as Sarah talked about, it is the helper for you. It can be the editor, it can be the partner to review, just to make sure that you got everything right before you submit it. But I would recommend when you're applying to a particular employer that in your summary, you actually list that employer as say like, active, hardworking professional interested in a career at CapitalOne, and like kind of like building on the skills of recruiting and compensation, like for many, many years.
Yes.
Like, but you list out the employer because actually that kind of is a key to the recruiter of this is someone who's really interested in this job. And that is actually a very positive signal. So it's so small, but you want to make sure you do it. And by the way, from personal experience, make sure you use AI to edit it. Because sometimes you submit the wrong resume to the wrong employer. And by the way, did not get called. Did not get called. You did that. So, that
it hurts, but it's happened to all of us.
I know. You're just like, oh no.
I meant to send it to CapitalOne, but I sent it to Discover. Good thing we're the same company now. Right. Worked out. All right. That's it for resumes, but if you have more questions on them, we will keep monitoring the chat. And we're going to move on to interviewing 101, but remember this is a dialogue, so feel free to throw anything in the chat as you need to.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so before we do this, I would love if you could pop into the chat. What are some of your do's and don'ts when it comes to interviews? I'd love to hear any and all that you think, like, I should absolutely be doing this. I should absolutely not be doing this.
I've got one that is so specific.
Oh, I love this.
Chewing gum in an interview.
No.
Yeah. No one wants to hear like the smacking and it just comes across as like not caring or not professional.
Many people have been chewing gum during their interview.
You'd be surprised.
Really?
You'd be surprised. Yeah.
Interesting.
Ask them questions on a positive.
Yes,
Definitely.
I totally agree with that. Don't give answers that are too long. I totally agree.
Oh,
2 minutes is really the cap. And again, I talked about this at the start, like rehearsing helps you. Rehearsing helps keep that time under 2 minutes.
Yes.
I think also too, it's, think about that storytelling. For me, that's everything is how can I actually rehearse a story, keep it under 2 minutes and make it really succinct and clear so that you walk away really knowing what I just told you
Yes.
about why I'm really fit for this job.
Definitely.
All right, we'll keep those coming, but let's kind of dive into this. So these are some of our do's and don'ts for you. This is a long list, but I'll highlight the ones that I think are probably the most important from my perspective. So, there's a lot of nonverbal behavior that you do that I think can send different signals. And there's actually a really interesting podcast about this, and I'm gonna have to try and remember where this was on. It might have been the Diary of a CEO, but it was a woman who was a scientist who actually really struggled to maintain relationships and friendships, and so did this whole study on like what are the cues that we give each other when that either make people more appealed to you or deter people away from you. And so one of them is the, silent body language. So it's how are you sitting? Are you hunched over or are you sitting upright?
You have your head in your hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
The firm handshake is another great example. But I think the body language can actually help demonstrate if you're enthusiastic and confident
Yes.
in the job and the interview itself. There's another really cool tip of like, if you are really nervous going into an interview, you can stand in the Superman position and look at yourself in the mirror in the bathroom, like do it for like a minute right before your interview, and it actually kind of subtly changes a lot of your body language. There's a TED Talk about it. I thought it was so fascinating.
Well, maybe it makes you so tired.
I know.
That actually makes me
I got
relax.
this. The other thing is speaking confidently by avoiding filters such as yup, and yeah. And so now for the rest of this presentation, you're going to notice how often Sarah and I are saying these things.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
There's also like, I just did it.
You
Oh my gosh, so a great way to practice that is having a friend go walk you through a mock interview so you can kind of dress rehearse your answers, but also just simply practicing your answers in the mirror is another really great way to remove some of those fillers. It is also okay, by the way, if someone asks you a question you really need time, say, "Can I take a moment?" It's okay. Do that rather than sit there and go, well, it kind of that starts changing the tone of the interview. So it's okay to ask for time.
Yes.
Also remember to thank the interviewer for his or her time. So that is definitely a big one, also paired with making sure you ask questions. So at the end of an interview, when they pause and say, "Do you have any questions for me?" Please, please, please always ask something, even if it's something you feel like you might know the answer to. It's a really great way to demonstrate your interest, not only in them, but in the company, in the initiatives. So I think that's always important. On the flip side, on the don'ts, don't assume your interviewer has reviewed your resume. I actually think a really cool thing to do is show up to your interview, if it's in person, with your resume in hand to be able to hand them a copy. They probably will already have a copy, but in case they don't, that just also demonstrates that like extra level of initiative and excitement about the job. And then also kind of giving them somewhere that you can start talking about that really big question of, tell me about yourself. So, and we'll get to that, don't worry. Don't criticize yourself. This is your time to shine. Don't talk about the personal problems. Really avoid bringing up any negative information about past jobs. That is definitely, I think, one of the things you want to avoid. There are ways of being honest. So like, for example, criticizing about yourself. If you got to talk about your weaknesses, talk about your weaknesses. But you can also talk about them in a way that really highlights your awareness of them and what you're doing to address them.
Yes.
So like, for example, if my weakness is overanalyzing, I can get really hung up on overanalyzing a problem, but it also means I think about a problem in a million different ways. And also, these are some of the methods I've been using to stop myself from overanalyzing so that I can get faster to the problem solving place. And then especially when you're talking about negative past experiences, you can just say general statements like, parted ways, or just looking for an opportunity where I can actually apply these skills.
The company was going in a direction that I didn't see made the most sense for my development.
Yes. And then ask questions that the interviewer has already answered. So yeah, so that is always kind of a big don't. So that's why on the flip, when you go to the what questions are you going to ask your interviewer, have a few in your back pocket that are kind of a good catch-all. Like, what is it that made you so excited about working at this company?
What's the biggest thing you've learned here in your last role?
Yep. Okay. So, as I alluded, there is this really big looming question that they always use to start off an interview. And actually, this is the hardest question for people to answer because I think, to Ryan's earlier point, this is one where you could talk 5 minutes or you could talk 30 seconds, and actually neither are really great. You really want to hit that sweet 2-minute mark on this one. So what are some of the things that you really need to do for this? So one, I think it's really think about your elevator pitch. This is when they say, tell me about yourself, this is your moment to highlight those key experiences, key information about yourself. And is also your pitch to share, why are you excited about this job? So think about it as the like perfect pitch where you get to highlight what you're bringing to the table, but then connect it at the very end to say, what are you going to be bringing to the table to this particular role, this company, and how are you going to help them get to that next level? So I think I kind of hit everything here, but Sarah, is there anything that you would build on when it comes to this particular question?
Yeah, actually, I don't think so. I think you've hit everything. Normally, I always have something to say, and I actually think you did a perfect job on this.
And the other thing too, I love that line around what is it you want interviewers to remember about you? This isn't your chance to say everything on your resume. This is your chance to highlight only the things that are the most relevant. And oh no, did we lose Sarah?
Yeah, my Chrome decided it wanted to update in the middle of this, but don't worry. It's a good opportunity for us to go ahead and look at the chat.
Oh, here, I got it.
Yeah, there
I'll
is a
get the
question in the chat.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I'll read this one. Regarding send you thank you notes after the interview, is it okay to ask the hiring manager for their email address so one can send a thank you? I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So oftentimes, it depends on what company you're working with, but oftentimes you will have a recruiter who's kind of your main point of contact. Definitely use them as your main source of information. So to get your hiring manager's email address, if they don't send you their email address, you can also find them on LinkedIn. Most people are on LinkedIn, and that's another great way to send a follow-up email if you want to send it that way. But definitely love that sentiment, Ryan. A virtual thank you is great. And we also have a template at the end of this presentation for you.
And then we had another one from Jonathan.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on asking the interviewer at the end, what would make me a stronger candidate for this position?
Ooh.
I think it depends. I think that that's situational based on who's interviewing you, because you could have a recruiter interviewing you. And in that case, I actually think that is the perfect opportunity to ask, because it's basically just another way to ask, what are you looking for, but a little more specifically tailored to you and how you guys match up on that one. I think it would also depend on how the interview went, how you felt like it went. If they told you at the end of the interview, we enjoyed speaking with you, we are not moving forward, I think that is a great time to say, thank you for letting me know what would have made me a stronger candidate, or I'd love some feedback from you in a kind and very receptive way. I think if the interview went really well, I would actually not ask that question, because you want to go out with confidence. The interview went so well that I know you want to hire me. And so you could even wrap up with, I feel like this is a great position for what I'm looking for. I feel like I'm a great fit for the position, but obviously, time will tell, and I look forward to hearing from you.
I might disagree with
That's
you on
fine.
this one.
That's what
but
makes a market.
yeah. But actually we had a teammate that just joined the team, and the hiring manager who hired this person would really loved that they asked this particular question, and it wasn't worded this way. So I actually might suggest rewording, but it was along the same veins of what are you looking for in this position that I may not have told you yet?
Ah,
Right? Like it's
I
kind
love
of like
that.
it's the teaser, but I love so that this question could be such a powerful tool to make sure that the hiring manager walks away with all of the relevant information of what they're looking
Yes.
for. Because that's the hard part about an interview, right? You don't know what's on their checklist. You don't know what they're looking to pop. And so you may have been choosing to go a totally different way.
Mhm.
And this question could be a really great way to redirect or reframe so that you could say,
Yeah.
actually, you think I don't have these qualities, but in fact I do. And here's those experiences, here's
Yeah.
those qualities
And
that I've
Druthi
demonstrated.
asked for you to repeat that question, which
Oh.
I think it was something,
Goodness
yeah,
gracious.
it was something along the lines of, what are you looking for in this job that I have not spoken about yet?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's it.
something like that.
Perfect.
What skills are you looking for in this job that
Yep.
I've not spoken about?
Yep. And then after the interview, how can I follow up about the status of a job? Oh, this is such a hard question because I know that there's so much anxiety sometimes, depending on where you are in the job market. So my recommendation is give it at least a week.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's how long it takes to filter through other candidates, start coordinating on leaders' calendars to kind of get them all together to make the decision about who to hire. Um, I would check in about a week later. And then after that, I do think like probably once a week, check in with your recruiter, by the
Yes,
way,
not
not the
the hiring
hiring manager. That's what we knew this. Your recruiter should absolutely be the person that you work with. The hiring manager, only send the thank you note. And again, we'll kind of give you a good template to work from, but only send the thank you note. Don't follow up for the status updates with them. Yeah.
That was freaky.
Yeah, I know. It's like we've been on the same team for a
Right?
while. Okay, so there's two types of interviews, and we're really only going to focus on the behavioral interview today. Case interviews, there are some really great YouTube videos that I think if you have a case interview, there's one. This is probably more for a financial services company or consulting company, but there's a McKinsey video out there that is a really great test for you on that. So use YouTube for case interviews, but we'll talk to you about behavioral interviews and how to structure this.
Yes.
Okay, so for behavioral interviews, this is really to get you to practice your storytelling, and also really highlight different experiences, but also how those experiences taught you things, or demonstrated your development in certain competencies or skills. And so I think about that a lot when I'm reviewing my resume. For example, like these are 5 different types of behavioral questions you could get. And when I look at my resume, I try to find about 3 to 5 examples or experiences that I have that could serve dual purposes when I get these questions. For example, tell me about how you worked effectively under pressure. I have had an experience where I was developing a brand new development program here at Capital One for some, executive level leaders. That was incredibly high pressure. So I could use that same experience to answer that question. I can also use that same experience to answer the question about how do you handle a challenge? Because there were a lot of challenges we faced when dealing with developing this new differential program. So again, when you're practicing these different types of behavioral interview questions, you don't have to highlight an, 20 different experiences. Just pick 3 to 5 that are really great, all encompassing, and you can use that same experience to answer a few different questions. I wouldn't do more than 2. But you can have those in your back pocket ready to kind of like flex as you need. Oh my gosh.
Again.
We're like the same.
The mind melt.
I know, it's really. Okay, so we're going to actually ask you to practice. So very similar to the exercise we did with Sarah. I'm going to ask you a behavioral question, and then I would love for you to use the SAR method. So what is the SAR method? Sarah already kind of talked about this, but it is situation, action, and result. The reason we use this model to help you focus your answers is 1, to help you with your storytelling, 2, to also help you keep under that 2-minute mark. And 3, because it's a really great way to highlight you as part of the story. So for example, if you're using the SAR method to answer an interview question, you would want to spend maybe 1 or 2 sentences kind of setting up what is the situation. But then you really want to focus on the action you took. And again, this is where you pop on that page. When they walk away, this is what they remember.
This is where you brag about
Yes,
yourself.
exactly. And then the result. So this is actually probably one of the most important parts of it is you can do all the actions in the world, but they also want to know what was the impact that you had at the end of the day. That is one of the most important things because they're thinking, how do I take this awesome person and bring them here? And I need to see what impact they've had. Okay, so I've kind of monologued a little bit. I hope you're taking a moment to kind of think about some of the experiences on your resume you'd like to highlight. The question I'm going to ask you is the same as the one on the previous slide. So Sarah, if we actually want to go back to this previous slide, we're going to do the tell me about how you worked effectively under pressure. So using the SAR method, I would like for you to answer that question. Sarah?
I knew you were going to ask me. I was starting to worm my head a little.
I know. We've done this many times,
Yes.
so. All right, so tell me about how you worked effectively under pressure.
I love this question because I feel like in some semblance of work, there's always a variety of pressure, light or heavy, that you might be working against. One thing in particular that comes to mind is my time when I owned a small business. And I entered into that at a pretty young period in my life. I had the world on my shoulders because basically I got paid last. When you are the business owner, you have to make sure you pay all of your key costs, like rent, like all of your expenses to have the equipment in your location, and then of course the most important thing, which is your employees. So whatever's left at the end of the day is finally going to be your take home. You hope that's going to be a lot of money. It's not always the case. The reason I felt I was under some massive pressure was because I bought a studio that was maybe break even, depending on the month. Very little profit was being turned over month to month. And so the pressure was a little bit of personal pressure I was facing on myself, but it was, how do I make sure that I am going to make enough money to earn a living when I have to be responsible for all of these other expenses? Well, I had to get the studio to a place of success. So what did I do? I had to go into hyper organization mode. So I had to think, what are the key levers right here for making money and for losing money? And how do I organize these to be able to optimize the making money revenue streams and minimize the losing money streams? And so there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but I also tried to do it with minimal disruption to my client base and my associates, and really just make sure that I was being effective with my use of time and as efficient as possible. So I had so many tracking devices, I had so many communication devices that I implemented to really keep my eye on the prize. And what I was able to do was actually grow our customer base 100% over 6 months, so that we were in a much better place as far as the money we were earning. And I no longer had the terrified pressure of thinking that I was not going to be able to pay my personal rent of my apartment, because that was one of the major expenses I had personally that my paycheck was reliant on. Self-pressure, but pressure.
Ooh, did you hear like all those numbers she was throwing out there at the end? I love it. When we talk about like that result and impact, like I think like that was a really great moment to be like, oh yeah, I'm seeing all the things you were doing and I got to hear the awesome impact that you ended up having.
And I think for me, that example, a version of that example could be applied to other questions on here. How do you handle a challenge? How do I handle the challenge of a studio that's barely making any money and the world's on my shoulders to actually turn it around? How was I able to motivate employees or coworkers?
That's such a great one for
right?
that.
I mean, I had my personal motivation, and so I didn't talk about this in the example I used, but a flavor of what I could go deeper on would be, what did I do to actually get my employees to see the vision of what I wanted for my business? So that would go a little more in depth in some of the things I shared. And even how I worked on a team. I led the team, it's a little different, but there's a lot in there where I wouldn't use the same example for every question you're being asked, but what I would do is have 3 to 5 examples prepped. And as we talked about, flexing based on the question and feeling really confident in the example, and where are some places you can lean in or lean out a little bit more.
And by the way, I just want to acknowledge, I think AI here can also be an amazing buddy for you in this. So like, I think it's really fair to have AI kind of give you some canned behavioral interview questions. And then you can just practice and dress rehearse a little bit. You know,
Yes.
like look in the mirror, practice saying it out loud, practice not using filler words, practice presenting it confidently, practice using that SAR method to keep it short and condensed. You can even practice timing yourself. But I think also you can have AI be a really great partner in either A, like listening to your responses and giving you support, or B, I think you can absolutely have it be practice being your interviewer.
Yes, you can say, can you probe a little more on the example I put? What kind
Yeah.
of questions might you want to ask because of what I shared?
Yep.
Yeah. And you could even give them, this is the SAR method. I am trying to answer questions that are going to showcase my teamwork, my grit, my perseverance. And it can come up with things and ask you questions. And then you can give an answer and say, how did I do as it relates to the SAR method?
Yep.
Make it work for you.
Exactly. All right, I think folks are still kind of working on their answers, so we'll keep moving forward. But if you would like to pop into the chat an answer to that question, please do so. And Sarah and I are happy to take a pause and we'll give you some thoughts and feedback. Because again, that's why we're here. We're here to help you. All right. So, as we've had a lot of questions about this, so I love that y'all are already thinking about it. Sending thank you emails is amazing, important, and a really, really, really great way to kind of keep that relationship going with your interviewers. So, and I'm going to call this out right here, right now, because I just think it's really important. Sometimes you might not end up getting the job because there was an internal candidate who had maybe more experience, but the hiring manager loved you and was like, I would hire this person tomorrow for another position. And so I actually think sending the thank you email is really important because it opens the door to future communications. Yes. And it also is a great way of letting your hiring manager know how excited and passionate you are. So again, please do this. If not, because maybe you're like, hey, maybe that interview didn't go well, but maybe maybe there's a future opportunity that you could be a great candidate for.
Definitely.
Definitely be quick to respond or to follow-up calls or emails. So again, your recruiter might call you and be like, hey, they like have a quick update for you. So you always really want to be able to pick up the call if you are expecting any kind of follow-up. Be positive, patient, yet persistent. I think we talked about this earlier. Once a week follow-ups with the recruiter to see the status is a really, really great way to just continue to stay in touch and getting your updates as you can. But again, you don't want to do this daily. You don't want to do this twice a week. Weekly is a good cadence. And then I mentioned this at the top, but follow your employer on social media. LinkedIn, again, actually social media, just LinkedIn. Don't do it on Instagram or Facebook or any of that. But any of your interviewers, definitely you can follow them on LinkedIn. That's a great way to continue to stay connected. And then this is a follow-up email. So I would want to really highlight here the personalized message. So this comes out when you've asked those questions at the end of an interview, right? So your interviewer will say, hey, is there anything else you want to know? And it might happen at the start, but oftentimes that's a great way to actually personally get to know who your interviewer is. How long have they been at the company? Why have they chosen to stay there? What makes them excited about their job? But find something. Try to remember that, because if you can include that in the personalized follow-up email, that actually goes a really, really long way in helping them feel more connected to you and be a better advocate for you, if not just for this current opportunity, but future opportunities as well.
We all just want to be seen as individuals. And so if I'm going to share something personal about myself as it relates to my career, my path, whatever it might be, if you can remember that, I'm going to feel like the conversation made an impact on you and feel a little bit more highly of you making an impact on me.
Yep. And then again, like I think as other parts of this email, like make sure you indicate why you qualify for this position. Why are you excited about this position? But then as I kind of mentioned on the previous slide, make sure you include your resume. This is a great opportunity to open the door. Because if it's not this role, it could be a future role, and making sure your information is out there, that you are demonstrating that excitement and that energy is a really great way to continue that relationship so that you can land a future opportunity. And so with that, that is all we have today. And I know we're ending a few minutes early. Oh, we got a question. Sometimes there is no Sometimes there's no end result in my experience. Example, while I am working for a situation, I probably move to another role or team. So then that situation remains the same. There's no end result. How do I address this kind of situation? Oh, I love that question. We have a lot of org changes in Capital One.
All the time.
Oh my God, it's like every day. So sometimes it might not be a huge business result that you can speak to, but there are still results that I would say you can drive.
Yep.
That are maybe more personal results, like Sarah, I'm trying to think of a good example. So like maybe for me it might be from a program development perspective, right? Like I do a lot of training. So say that, there was an org change and I never got to deliver the training. I at least did all of the design work.
Yep.
I did all of the testing. I created the measurement strategy. I created the end-to-end experience map for the customer. Like there's things I still did that while maybe didn't impact their direct business, still was a clear result.
And could be picked up and used by somebody else to have that result. And they ran because Emmy walked.
Yep.
In that situation. Yeah, 100% agree. I think a little bit more outside of the box on what you did do. And so the results might not be quantifiable. And I know we push numbers. That's not always possible. But what did you do and what skills did you use to power that? Because ultimately that's actually what the employer is looking for.
Yeah.
It is the skills that powered the results, because the exact situation that's listed on your resume will never match perfectly the situation that is going to be at your new employer, because it's a different set of people. It's a different set of problems, among many other things. But if you have the skill sets that can be adapted based on the situation, then you can be a really great fit. So really focusing on how you did that thing. And the impact is important, but saying, unfortunately, I was never able to deliver this because of an org change, but I know that the next person who picked up this work stream was going to be like soup to nuts, be able to execute on it because of the strategy I created.
And if I may also, I actually just learned the other day, this was like shocking to me. I had done all this work, just like I talked about. I did all this work to hire this new company to come in and do an assessment for our executives in the development program I built. And I left that job. I, moved on. It's been years later. And I kind of thought I thought we stopped using them, honestly. And I only found out the other day they're actually still using the same company. And I was like, wait a minute. So I did something. I started something. I had no idea where it ended, but it's still being in use. So actually, sometimes it's worthwhile following up with those that may have inherited your work just to kind of see where they're at, because that actually helps you speak to the longevity and the impact.
I would update your resume with that result in your name.
Honestly, I was like, I did not realize, and it's my brand new teammate who was like, oh yeah, I was like leading all of this work. And I was like, wait, I started that. And we were just having this whole conversation.
Cool moment. Oh.
Yeah. Also, it's really validating, I think, for you if you're in a state of constant change, like to see the impact of your work. Because I can see how frustrating that might be for you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, we will let y'all go. But thank you so much for the time today.
Oh, that was helpful, Ryan. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you all had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if we still have some attendees, I'd like to share some library resources. If we still have some attendees, I have some library resources that I'd like to share with you as well. And this will give you a few more minutes to think of questions for Sarah and Emmy. So here at our Plano Public Library website, planolibrary.org, we have a career and job skills page for you to explore. And I'm going to show you, I want to draw your attention to the second tab that has the job resource connection. This is a program that we host twice a month for our job seekers. We meet every other Monday, and it's on our calendar that you'll find on our website. We usually have a topic applicable for job seekers, and then we have time to tailor your needs. Are you looking for help on a resume? Are you looking for ways to increase your skills? And so that job resource tab right there for the resource connection is an ongoing program. So please explore that page. We also have the Job Seek and Career Toolkit that you see in the red tab. And let me see if I can show you a picture of that. This is a tool you can access online or in person. And what we did here is we broke the job search and beyond into 5 categories. And we've listed some of our resources that are very helpful with that particular aspect of your job search. So for example, exploring careers, we have a list of online resources as well as our databases like Learning Express Library and LinkedIn Learning and Udemy. And so as you can see, both on the front page and back page, we have a whole list of resources for you to explore. And if you have any library-related questions, feel free to contact me at sfornash@plano.gov. Once again, I'd like to thank Sarah and Emmy for such a wonderful program. And are there any other questions before we say goodbye? All right. Well, thank you so much for attending. You guys have a great day.